Now, the outgoing Gauteng Human Settlements MEC, Uhuru Moiloa, has been making submissions to the inquiry into human rights violations in the embattled township. The inquiry is also probing whether service delivery issues could be linked to maladministration and the abuse of power. Our reporter Maageketla Mohlabe has been following this story for some time now. Maageketla, thanks very much for joining us. What happened today at the inquiry?
So, what happened really today, Peter, is that all spheres of government from human settlements actually took the stand and facing tough questions from the commissioners, from Human Rights Commission, as well as the Public Protector's Office. And of course, I still recall one of the lines, and I'll quote it by Director General from the National Human Settlement. And what he said, his name is Neville Shaney, he said that, "I think we must concede there were failures." And of course, here he talks about the Alex renewal project, which we know that it was established by former President Thabo Mbeki in 2001. And of course, we know that all three spheres of government actually adopted it. And of course, they had to contribute some amount of money there. But on the other side, some inconsistencies in terms of coming forward with what the Commission really wants, because there isn't any clear answer in terms of how that money was spent. But of course, this is what both the Public Protector as well as the Human Rights Commission are trying to actually dig in and trying to get answers. But of course, he says that we need to actually take collective responsibility when it comes to the issues of service delivery in Alexandra. On the other side, saying that Alexandra should not be treated as an island. We cannot just leave Alexandra to actually take care of its own issues. We need to go there, you know, personally or in the capacity as officials from all three spheres of government to actually intervene. But just to give you details on that, this is what they had to say during that inquiry today.
I think what we want to be able to do is we must concede where there are failures. In our analysis, our monitoring and evaluation, and sorry for the city, but I have to say this one, there's been city and the province, there's been, in our view, a less than required sense of urgency in addressing the plight of households in informal settlements, either in terms of water, sanitation, tenure, land acquisition.
It is my appeal to the Commission that as it begins to probe on all the mismanagement that I would have done, me and my colleagues, in the Alex project, but also begin to highlight this issue of people who happen to be advantaged, playing a role in ensuring that there is reconstruction and redevelopment of Alex.
So, some pretty definite points of view there from the SHRC and the other partner, the
Human Rights Commission.
Human Rights Commission there, of course. But what did the human settlements have to say about this?
Well, I mean, the human settlements from Gauteng, and of course represented by the outgoing MEC, Uhuru Moiloa, definitely lambasting the slow pace of service delivery in Alex, saying that the lawlessness and anarchy, thus they actually impede the progress of service delivery. And of course, he's actually alluding to the unabated illegal occupation of land. And of course, he actually mentioned that in as much as they tried to actually remove people from the edges of Jacques River, trying to relocate them and give them housing, there were still people that came after and then occupied that land illegally. On the other side, you hear of land, I mean, the issues of land, of course, the property owners disputing the development in Alexandra, saying that there were court interdicts. And of course, these are some of the points that actually came out throughout the protest. You recall that Gauteng Premier David Makhura did go to Alex after those protests, as well as the president, of course, trying to quell these particular protests. But let's just have a listen to what Uhuru Moiloa had to say today.
For Alexandra to develop, there has to be order and law. And I'm emphasizing order before law. right? There has to be order, because as the situation is currently in Alexandra, and you would have observed, I'm sure, in your inspection in local, is complete lawlessness and anarchy. So the DG was saying it's a disaster waiting to happen. This country is going to be found wanting if we are not to get into Alexandra and address this.
All right, so that's someone defending his position clearly, but this is a story that's been a long time in the making, particularly when you consider the Alex Renewal project could not have been instituted if there wasn't a problem as far back as then. Will we hear from previous officials at this inquiry? Do you know?
Of course, as far as we know, COGTA on the other side, we know that they are leading the interministerial task team that was appointed by the president, and of course that we know that later there was the intergovernmental task team, which involves national, provincial, as well as the local government, to actually look into these issues. We know that they're going to be appearing early next month, and that's when actually we will hear more about the Alex Renewal project in terms of what it did, because as it stands so far, we really haven't gotten to know what happened to the money that was allocated to that project. We know that this is a project that was meant to benefit a lot of people in Alexandra, but of course issues coming out in terms of housing. We know that there's mushrooming of shacks in the area, and of course that's one of the issues that kept on coming out throughout the protests. So it just remains to be seen what's going to come out. Of course, after this process, there will be findings, recommendations. So we'll just see what's going to happen. And don't forget, there's still also an audit that we were told that it's going to be looked into, so that we may be able to know what happens to this particular money. It just remains to be seen what's going to come out. I mean, you will have recommendations, then you will have a report by the Auditor General. I think some explosive stuff are going to come out of this.
I mean, it is an interesting precedent that's being set, because Alexandra is not the only township in the country that saw service delivery protests and has seen discontent amongst residents. And I wonder if this isn't going to start a wave of inquiries, or is this going to be one that sets a standard of how all the other townships will be dealt with?
Well, in fact, in the words of the Human Rights Commission provincial manager, Wang Jones, he said that he hopes that this is the start of, remember, this is a joint inquiry between the Human Rights Commission as well as the public protector. So he believes that if this kind of intervention can continue throughout the country, not only in Gauteng, they believe that some of these issues, as we've seen in Alexandra, could come to an end, and of course could come to light in terms of exposing some allegations of corruption, more especially when it comes to housing, because we know that there's a lot of informal settlements, more especially in Gauteng, that still need basic services. When you can talk about water, you can talk about sanitation. Those are some of the things that these residents are facing across not only in Gauteng, of course, in the country.
Maageketla, thanks very much indeed for following this story for us, and I have no doubt that there's still much more to come out in the coming weeks. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, so that's our reporter, Maageketla Mohlabe, who's been following this story that's playing out in Johannesburg at the moment, this inquiry into the situation in Alexandra.